Okay, welcome. Glad to have you here, Dennis and Arlyn, and very excited with what we're going to be talking about today. And I'm going to start out reading your bios. So Dennis Trittin is the founder and CEO of LifeSmart Publishing and author of Parenting for the Launch and What I Wish I Knew at 18. I love both of the books, and they are so helpful, and I use them in my mom's groups, and they've just been great. And all the moms have really gotten a lot out of your book, so I just have to add that. His mission is to equip the next generation with the leadership and life skills they need to succeed. Through books, curriculum, and speaking engagements, Dennis serves young people around the world and the parents, educators, and mentors guiding them. And previously, Dennis, you served as the Director of Research and Strategy at Russell Investments, where you spent 28 years managing $35 billion, wow, and evaluating success leaders around the globe. And so you really bring a unique perspective to helping teens and young adults, and with all the powerful leadership skills that you bring to that. And then you and your wife, Jeannie, right? You've been married for 35 years and have 2 grown children and who are living their dream in Gig Harbor, Washington. So you're on Pacific time. So yeah, I've never been there. So now that you're both there, I'm going to have to get there. Come visit you. And Arlyn Lawrence is the co-author of Parenting for the Launch, Raising Teens to Succeed in the Real World and What I Wish I Knew at 18, a leadership and life skills course for teens used in high schools and mentor organizations all around the United States. And in groups, lots of like our mom's group, as a speaker, author, curriculum developer, and former youth and family ministry director, she has been serving families and educators for 30 years on the topics of character, relationships, parenting, and leadership. You're also the founder and president of Inspira. Is that how you say it? Okay, Literacy Solutions, which is a publishing, writing, editorial services company in Gig Harbor, Washington as well. And you and your husband are the parents of 5. Wow. So you've grown children and grandparents of 4.
I can attest to wow, knowing her family as I do.
Well, I'm very excited with the experience that you bring and your wisdom, and to be talking about how do we help our kids to become responsible adults. And in this culture, it's overwhelming. We have so many things that are coming at our kids. So I just want to launch in and talk about, reading your book was so helpful to me about helping our kids to become self-confident and independent. And you talk a lot about giving them wings versus strings, which I find is so common that moms bring that up all the time now in my groups. How do you do that? Even this morning I was leading a meetup, which I was sharing, and we were talking about that. So can you speak to, when you say wings versus strings, I think most of us know what that means, but talk a little bit about that.
You bet. Well, let me start with the string side of the equation, but to set it up by saying that when Arlyn and I were writing Parenting for the Launch, we were both launching our youngest. So we were living what we were writing, and it was so fun. And we wanted to have an image that really inspired parents, but also really set the stage. And that was, are we releasing an eagle to soar, wings, or are we releasing a kite that we continue to control, maneuver, manipulate, etc.? Because we've seen a lot of the latter in all of the different spheres that we deal with. So we decided to go with that, and that was our first chapter. But just to talk a little bit about what's going on out there, you can see in college campuses all of the strings, and it's in many forms. You can see it in anxiety levels. You can see it in dropout rates after the first year, just going up dramatically, our falling graduation rates, and just talking with university presidents, et cetera, most of their students are not prepared for this huge adjustment in their lives. And you can put some of the blame on the schools because they're so focused on academics and not so much on preparing them for the next step. But a lot of it is our parenting style, whether we're a helicopter parent, which is probably among the most common, where we're constantly there hovering and interfering and controlling and not letting them make decisions and things, or the performance parent, which is very common, especially from very successful career people who are imposing their performance pressures on their kids and almost wanting to create mini me's, as we call it. And then a third category that is somewhat distressing, but it's increasingly common, is what we call buddy parenting or permissive parenting. And it's the parent that views their kid as their best friend. And as a result, the kids don't have a true understanding of authority. They're disrespectful to authority. They're unmotivated. So all of these types of parenting styles are definitely finding their ramifications in how ill-prepared many young people are. And so that's why we started the book with that. And I'm going to turn it over to Arlyn to come to the rescue and say, okay, how do we get around this and become people who give our kids strings, or wings, I should say.
I think one of the things that surprises people when they ask me what you just did about what does this look like is that it's not about what you can or can't get your kid to do, at least not primarily. It requires radical self-evaluation for us as parents, because many times the things that we're doing that create these strings, these things that Dennis was talking about, I would also add to that list a massive fear of failure, inability to move forward, entitlements. So things that we're seeing in our kids, even at a young age, many times are rooted in us and in our well-intentioned efforts. We are creating the strings ourselves. And then we find ourselves trying to manipulate their behavior because we don't like the behavior, but we got to get to the root.
So what does someone do to give them wings?
Well, for one, you have to be, like I said, you have to do self-evaluation of yourself. Another one is to understand how unique each one of our children is. What works with one child is not going to work with another child. Each one of our children is uniquely wired. We throw out that Stephen Covey phrase a lot, begin with the end in mind, and approaching parenting strategically, having a philosophy of parenting that goes, okay, what is our end game, and what are we doing or not doing as parents to set them up for success? So having parenting strategies, basically in our book, each one of the chapters is a parenting strategy, everything from valuing your child's uniqueness and affirming their worth to knowing their third-party voices and things that are maybe not your common, manipulating behavior kind of strategies. That would be part of it right there is being strategic instead of just kind of reacting to what our kids are doing and looking at how their uniqueness influences the way we parent each child. Each one of my 5 kids was very different. And so there were things that I did with one that wouldn't work with the next one. Mm-hmm. And I had to go back to how is that child wired? How am I wired? How do we interact with each other? And what's the best way to forge an enduring relationship that's going to sustain us and help us to navigate life moving forward? It's not anymore because I said so. Maybe a lot of us grew up with that because I said so. And we got to be a lot more strategic and individualized in that.
Our culture has changed so much that doesn't work. Yes. So can you give me an example, Arlyn, of how it was different with 2 of your kids?
Okay. One of my children, I was one of those people that the first one was very easy, was very compliant, and didn't require a lot of discipline, whereas number 2 challenged a lot more. And I realized as I was raising all of my kids, number 2 was actually a lot like me. So our
I hate when that happens.
I know. But I actually was looking at a lot of my own flaws, which can create a lot of interesting dynamics too. When my kids were young, my husband and I were introduced to a personality profile called the DISC profile that we highlight in our book that really helped me tremendously. And I found that when I understood how I was wired and understood how my kids were wired, it helped me communicate with them differently. So the child that I was struggling with tended to be kind of disorganized, super gregarious, very much a people person, but lacked detail. And because I lacked detail, we would often find we didn't communicate because we each assumed the other one intuitively understood what needed to happen. So instead of making that a frustration and wanting to punish her, I needed to step back and understand how she was wired uniquely, how the way I was wired influenced our interactions, and adjust my expectations and also the way I dealt with her. So whereas the child who was more compliant and more detailed oriented, interestingly enough, he grew up to become a planner, but career-wise, that's what he does. And he was such a planner. I didn't need to do that with him. So yeah, it was adjusting my expectations and then also my own behavior that helped me be able to relate and parent that second child differently.
Thanks for giving that example. I find it's our children that can be most challenging, that can grow us up the most. I really believe that it's like we think we're raising our kids, but at the same time, they're raising us up in many ways because we have to learn about these ways that we're relating to them that aren't working, and to, like you were saying, to self-reflect about that.
You would add to that, you know, I think of another child where we really had to recruit what we call third-party voices in our book, because the challenges that we were having, he was so different from us, and it wasn't something we'd encountered with our other kids. And it felt like the corrections that we were trying to make were falling on deaf ears. And just as it happened, there was a high school coach, and that story's in our book as well too, that really ended up being the extra ingredient that brought the needed perspective to bring the catalytic change that needed to happen for that particular kid to launch and to kind of find his bearings. So that was another huge thing is it's looking around, okay, who is in my support network that I can pull in to leverage in working with this particular child. I always say parenting is a team sport.
Yeah. I love that. I don't know if I've heard that. So the third party voice, finding someone else, because oftentimes when they're tweens and teens, they won't always hear it from us, but they'll hear it from somebody else.
No.
So, yeah, I know, and you talk about, which I think is in your book, about how to communicate with our kids and how to build those relationships that are going to last into adulthood. Can you talk to us a little bit about what can we be doing to be building these relationships, especially if we're really struggling with a child?
You bet. Well, there are a number of strategies that we share in our Communicate and Relate chapter in Parenting for the Launch. And I think one of the most important ones is to increasingly think share with rather than talk to. So when we're in an authority figure and the kids are littler, you know, we tend to be more control oriented, and that's appropriate. But now we're working our kids to become future adults who can think on their own. And so one way to do this is to kind of shift our mindset toward the share with. Am I sharing with my teenager, or am I still talking to them? We want to put ourselves in their position. We ultimately want to have a relationship that's going to, you know, stand the test of time through their adult years. So we need to communicate with them in a way like we like to be communicated with. And so increasingly becoming a little more listening oriented rather than telling oriented is really important. The second thing, which, man, it was something I shared in the book that was such a revealing thing for me, probably more natural for Arlyn. but this concept of meeting them where they are. And I noticed our kids, whenever it was convenient for me to have deep, wonderful conversations, it was not convenient for them. Like on drives to school or whatever, where I thought,
your
oh man.
son, you talked about driving with your son in the car and he's fine.
Fine. And then I come to realize when I was that age, I didn't want to talk in the morning either. I mean, it's just that we have a role reversal here. So what we have to do is to become a student, like a student of our kids, and see where and when are the environments that they tend to open up the most. And for both of our kids, they're as different as day and night, but one common ingredient is they open up the most in coffee shops. So I started becoming a lot more strategic and inviting them to coffee shops. And then I would get whatever I wanted in terms of communication from them. But it wasn't at the dinner table, it wasn't at bedtime, it wasn't on the commutes or anything like that. But for other families, it is in the car or it's cooking a meal together. So we have to kind of think a little bit about when are those times that will allow for them to have the energy, the engagement, and that interest in sharing with us. Another thing that I think is really important, increasingly, especially as kids are starting to exert more independence and wanting to do things their way, we're gonna run into some conflict, especially on technology use or things like this, where especially boys are going to want to spend the moon on their video games, and we're going to have to do some tough love strategies. It's increasingly important in these, especially middle high school and above years, to have our kids understand the context, understand the why, rather than the just because I told you so.
Yeah.
And because this is a learning lesson that you can impart to them. And when we're seeing such difficulty with so many people in handling life on their own, it helps for us to be able to explain to them why we're providing the boundaries or the disciplines or whatever it is that we are. It is for their own good. It's not because we love correcting you or limiting your freedom or anything like that. But all of those things are super important. And then the last one I would share is to have fun. Yeah. You know, we can take this stuff so seriously and feel like our whole identities and our whole success as parents is going to be caught up in how happy they are and how successful they are and all of this. And it's like anything else. We want the best for them. It's just we can kind of take things a little bit too far and be a little bit too serious. And I just think, man, we are really investing in a relationship that is designed to last for a lifetime. By all means, we want to have fun together, and we want our kids to think that we're fun people to hang around with as well. And so being strategic about what fun looks like, you know, for each of our kids uniquely is a great strategy.
Yeah. It's easy to get focused, I think, especially if you have a more difficult child, on all the negative, especially as moms, and be hyper-focused on what they're not doing, or they're not doing their homework, or they're not picking up after themselves, rather than seeing all the things that they are doing. Yes. And be looking for those things.
Yeah.
You know, my husband said, what you focus on expands.
Yeah.
All the time, if I start to go down that road, he says, remember, what you focus on expands, and that's true of the positive and the negative. It expands in your own mind, is what it does.
Yeah.
So what do you think that as moms we can back off of? You know, speak to that. I do see that pattern now where we can see their grades, and you know, there's so much competition. Like, I live in a place where kids are taking like 3 different activities, and they're starting them when they're really young, and there's all this stress and anxiety. And moms are really focused on how well they're doing and the grades they're getting and all of those things. How would you coach a mom that's in that place where her kid, I had a mom send me an email because she knew I was doing this, and she's like, I can't get my kid to do their homework. And what do I do? And I'm in there, I'm looking at their grades, and if I wasn't on top of them, I don't think they would be doing it. Can you speak to that? That's often a common.
It is. It is. And I would say, first thing, don't do his homework or her homework for them. Don't do their homework for them. And a lot of parents will do that. They will jump in and they will do it. And that's creating a string. That's creating enabling. And one of the hardest things we can do as parents is let our kids fail and let natural consequences take over. And especially if our own identity is caught up with how well they perform, or how well they perform in comparison with our friends' kids, and even when I was a young mom and we didn't have Instagram, I didn't have, other moms blogging and showing all of this amazing success apparently on social media that I would be comparing myself to. I think moms today have that extra impediment, or that extra obstacle to get over, is comparing themselves to other people. So I would say don't enable them. Be willing to let them have natural consequences. One of the things we're seeing in kids is the inability to fail. Like they're so afraid of failure, they won't try anything. So let them fail and let them see that they can fail and then recover from failure. We've weakened them. We've short-circuited a natural process. The other thing is I would get to the root of why they're not doing their homework, kind of what I alluded to earlier. Many times it's not just a flat out rebellion, but maybe there is a fear of failure there that needs to be addressed. Maybe the child is overstimulated and having too many activities and they're not getting enough sleep and they can't focus. And so we hyper focus on the end result, which is the grades, but we don't really come back to the root of the problem. I think that's one of the biggest things that we learned through 5 Kids is don't just react to the circumstances, don't just react to the behavior. Go back to the root and find out what's causing it, and you're going to have way more success if you pull that sucker out by the root.
Yeah.
I would just add, in parenting our kids, we've always focused on whether they're doing their best. We're not focused on did you get this grade or that grade, or did you get into this school or that school. It's did you do your best. And where parents are, I think, are really missing out on building a great relationship is the pressure they're putting on their kids to know exactly what career they want at this point in time, or to do everything they need to do in order to get into Stanford or Harvard, as though if they don't make it into one of those schools, they're going to be a failure. And so there's a lot of these kinds of things that are happening, and it is stressing out the kids. And when you take a look at college experiences, the average student changes their major 2 or 3 times. They don't know themselves at age 16, or very few of them do, to make an informed judgment. They haven't even seen what the options are. So we're doing a lot of this pressure building on our kids. It's happening in a lot of circles. It's happening peer to peer. It's happening parent to parent. But I really push back hard when I hear parents. I was on a podcast a bit ago today, and they were saying how they're feeling guilty when other moms are talking with them about how their kid doesn't know what their major is, even though they're only a freshman in college, as though it's the mom's fault. That, and it's like, what are we doing? It's the kid's life, right? And we're there as their chief coach and encourager and role model.
Exactly. Well, and you think about it too with social media, and when you mention that, the kids are already doing that with themselves because they're on all this social media. And I know with my own kids talking about how many likes they get. Or my daughter sees another friend and she's gotten this many likes, but she's gotten, it's just, there's so much pressure, even, what I look like when I'm doing for them. You take us totally out of the equation, and they're already can be feeling that themselves and comparing themselves to other kids.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, I want to encourage parents to pick your battles and just know your kid needs you so badly to be their advocate, to be their biggest fan. And I remember when one of my kids was struggling, and we wrote on his birthday card, love mom and dad, we are your biggest fans. And he looked at me and kind of went, you are my biggest fans. and in the midst of that, we had been having conflict, and it was a real revelation to him, and I think a real shot in the arm that, oh yeah, you know, when the bottom line is mom and dad are my biggest fans. And you know, that was the one we did struggle with the homework thing. I remember him flat out telling me in high school, because he didn't care about high school, and he said, Mom, when I get to college, I'm going to care about college. I'll do great in college. And you know what? He did. He got
Yeah.
major a semester early, and he did great in college. But he got really crummy grades in high school, and that was his choice. And I really did have to come to the place where I had to let that I had to let him make that decision, that he was content with that, even though I wasn't. And I probably could have destroyed that relationship if I had been more heavy-handed than I was. And I feel okay about that decision. It ended well.
It's a real faith walk, isn't it? It's trusting, because I know, and I tell moms this, no, you're not alone, because parents are feeling this, moms are feeling this pressure, and knowing that it is not a reflection on us. Like you were saying, Arlyn, too, it's not, this is our kids, they're all different, they all have different needs. And to really trust, I had a daughter, and she actually she left college for a short time, and then she reapplied, and she got A's, and she soared, and she was actually even tutoring kids. And I would have never believed it, you know. So if we nurture them, accept them, love them, and, you know, have those boundaries for them, that no matter what they're doing, choices they're making, I love you, and I'm going to have good boundaries for you.
That's you just articulated it very well. That's giving them wings. Yeah.
So it's I know we're almost at time. We're going to have to do a part 2. So, but I love what you shared, and I just like stepping back, and and then the listening too. I just think that I heard it said, there's a reason we were born with 2 ears and 1 mouth. and I really like that, because I think we want to lecture, we want to give advice. So that stands out to me, you saying stand back and just listen to your kids.
Yeah, and oftentimes one of the best strategies increasingly through the high school years is when they're having issues and they come and we know what the answer is or what we would do, is to have them think it through and say, well, I could tell you what I would do, but I want you to tell me what you're thinking. Mm-hmm. How are you processing this? What do you think would be a good outcome? Because the more we give them those answers, and for those of us who are kind of type A people, and boy, is that ever easy to do, it's not developing their own decision-making skills. And that's a great way of working from our being in the driver's seat over to the passenger seat, increasingly treating them as an adult, showing that we're confident in their decision-making skills, and by asking them to share what their kind of preliminary thinking is before, you know, we insert our own view and then they go ahead and do it. That is a huge self-confidence builder and a resilience builder that will stand the test of time.
That is so helpful to our listeners to hear how you actually do that. When we're tempted to give that advice, tell them what we think they should do, to ask question. Well, what do you think? I could tell you, but what do you think? What do you want to do? Yeah. Getting them to come up with it. Because usually with tweens or teens, if we tell them what to do, they're not gonna say, "Oh yeah, you're right, Mom," or "You're right, Dad." It doesn't really work. We try, but they usually tune us out.
Yeah. One of the things we often say, you're not raising kids, you're raising future independent adults. And having that perspective when you talk to them that's who they are, I think can help frame your conversations in a way that helps you be received better.
That like you said, having that long-term vision. We'll have to talk more on that too. So many good things in your book, both of your books that are helpful, and you talk about family agreements and having, you know, goals as a parent, and how to talk to our kids and build these relationships. And tell our listeners how they can find you.
Well, probably the quickest way is to go on lifesmartpublishing.com. And that is a landing page that takes viewers to two different options. There's the Parenting for the Launch site and the Trittin.com site. And that would probably be the most efficient way. They can sign up for our weekly newsletter and our blog that comes up. They can send me emails. There's a section on Contact Dennis on the right there, and I'll get the email, and I respond to moms just like this. So
you do. You're really good.
Facebook, we are on Twitter, we're on all the platforms.
Yeah.
I'm typing it in. So lifesmartpublishing.com, and Dennis Trittin, is it .com too?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And then Parenting for the Launch. Is that is that your Facebook page? I know that's your.
We have a Facebook page for Parenting for the Launch, and then we have my own fan page, which there's a lot of overlap, but the parenting sites are a little bit more parenting centric, whereas the other ones also have information for mentors and for educators and things like that. But we have a very rich blog history going back 5 years of weeklies. So people can search on different topics and they'll see, our thoughts on that. But we would love to hear from your audience. And hopefully they pick up our books. What I Wish I Knew a Teen, just as a very brief little commercial, is a fabulous book for the parents to go through with their teenagers during the high school years, because we're a third-party voice. We're not mom and dad, but we're saying an awful lot of things that mom and dad are saying too, but from independent authors who have these leadership backgrounds. And so everything about building a leadership foundation and preparing for college, career, dating and marriage, and managing your finances is in What I Wish I Knew at 18. And some of the most powerful testimonials we've ever received are from parents who went through the book with their teenagers, because the relationships just blossomed as the parents are sharing their own stories and experiences. And so it kind of covered the wisdom transfer, but also the relationship building goals that we had. And so anyway, you can find our books on our site. And
okay.
Yeah.
And you know what? When I send these out, when I send the recording out, I will also, so our listeners know, I will send all your contact information and how they can buy your books.
Great.
Okay. So, well, thank you. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Arlyn. It was great to be with you, and thank you for all your wisdom that you shared.
Yes.
Our
Thank you,
pleasure.
Cheryl,
Yes.
for having
Okay.
us and for what you do.
And yes, and I'm just very grateful, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye.
All right. Have a great day. Enjoy your weather that's going to be coming our way.
Yes.
I hope. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.